Michael Torres hadn't been back to his hometown in 12 years. At 28, he'd built a successful career as a financial analyst in the city, living the life he'd always dreamed of. But tonight, driving through on business, he found himself taking the old highway exit, the one that led past his childhood neighborhood, past a high school where he'd struggled, past a community college that had changed everything. It was past 11 when hunger got the best of him. The only place still open was Ruby's Diner, a retro establishment with neon signs that had been there since the 50s. Michael pulled into the nearly empty parking lot, memories flooding back. He'd spent countless nights here during college, nursing coffee and cramming for exams he was terrified of failing. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. The interior was exactly as he remembered. Red vinyl booths, a long chrome counter, checkered floor tiles worn smooth by decades of footsteps. A handful of late-night customers sat scattered throughout. The smell of coffee and grill food filled the air. Michael slid onto a stool at the counter, loosening his tie. It had been a long day of meetings, and tomorrow promised more the same. He was reaching for the laminated menu when a voice from behind the counter said, "I'll be right with you." That voice stopped his heart. He looked up slowly, and the menu slipped from his fingers. Standing before him in a waitress uniform, cream-colored button-down shirt, black slacks, hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, was someone he never expected to see here. Professor Elena Martinez. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Her dark eyes widened with recognition, and a flush of color rose to her cheeks. She was older than he remembered. Fine lines around her eyes, touches of silver in her dark hair, but still unmistakably the woman who had taught English literature at Riverside Community College, the woman who had believed in him when no one else did. "Michael," she said quietly, her voice catching slightly. "Professor Martinez," he replied, unable to hide his shock. "I were you." He stopped himself, realizing how his question would sound. The awkward silence stretched between them as other customers glanced their way. Elena's professional mask slipped back into place, but he could see the embarrassment in her eyes. "What can I get you?" she asked, pulling out her order pad with practiced efficiency. "Coffee," Michael said automatically, and he glanced at the menu without really seeing it. "A grilled cheese sandwich." She wrote it down and turned toward the coffee pot, her movement stiff. Michael watched her pour the coffee, her hand steady despite what must be tremendous discomfort. When she placed the cup in front of him, their eyes met briefly. "Cream and sugar are there," she said, nodding toward the counter dispensers before moving to put in his food order. Michael sat frozen, his mind reeling. Professor Martinez had been more than just a teacher to him. 10 years ago, when he'd been a scared 19-year-old who'd barely graduated high school, working 2 jobs and taking night classes, she'd seen something in him. She'd stayed after class to help him understand literature he'd never been exposed to. She'd written recommendation letters. She'd told him he was capable of more than he believed. "You have a gift with words, Michael," she told him once. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, not even yourself." She'd encourage him to apply to the state university, something he'd never imagined possible. When he'd gotten in with a scholarship, she'd been the first person he'd told. He remembered the pride in her eyes, the way she'd said, "I knew you could do it." And now here she was, working the night shift at a diner. Michael's sandwich arrived, but he could barely look at it. Elena refilled coffee for other customers, took orders, wiped down the counter, all with the same grace and dignity she'd brought to her classroom. But something was different. The confidence he remembered had been replaced by something more guarded, more worn. When the diner emptied except for one elderly man reading a newspaper in the corner booth, Michael finally spoke. "Professor Martinez," he said quietly, "can we talk?" She looked at him for a long moment, and he saw her consider refusing. Then she glanced at the clock and nodded. My break is in 10 minutes. I can spare a few. Those 10 minutes felt like an eternity. When she finally came around the counter and sat on the stool beside him, Michael didn't know where to start. You don't have to explain anything to me, he said finally. I wanted you to know that seeing you tonight, it reminded me of everything you did for me. You changed my life, Professor. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. I'm glad to hear you're doing well, she said. And please, call me Elena. I haven't been a professor in a long time. What happened? Michael asked gently. Elena took a deep breath. Life happened, she said with a sad smile. My husband, you never met him. He was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's 6 years ago. He was only 53. The medical bills were overwhelming, even with insurance. I took a leave from teaching to care for him full time. When he passed away 3 years ago, I'd been out of academia too long. Budget cuts had eliminated my position. I applied everywhere, but she shrugged. I'm 55 years old, overqualified for some things, underqualified for others, because the field had moved on without me. Michael felt his throat tighten. I'm so sorry, he said. I had no idea. Why would you? Elena replied. You graduated and moved on to bigger things. That's what you were supposed to do. She smiled, and this time it was more genuine. Tell me about your life. Are you happy? They talked for 20 minutes that felt like 20 seconds. Michael told her about his career, his apartment in the city, the promotions he'd earned. But as he spoke, he realized something. He told her about his job with pride, but when she asked if he was happy, he hesitated. I'm successful, he said finally. I make good money. I have a nice life. That's not what I asked, Elena said gently. And suddenly she was a professor again, asking the questions that cut to the heart of things. Michael looked down at his cold coffee. I write reports and analysis, he said quietly. Numbers and projections. It's fine. It's good work. But sometimes I remember, you used to tell me I had a gift with words. I haven't written anything creative in 10 years. I told myself there wasn't time, that it wasn't practical, that I needed to focus on my career. Elena nodded slowly. I did the same thing. Told myself that caring for my husband was all that mattered, that teaching could wait. Then suddenly it couldn't wait anymore. It was just gone. Time has a way of making our choices for us if we don't make them ourselves. Her break ended, and she stood to return to work. Elena, Michael said, an idea forming in his mind. What were your hours here? Night shift, 5 nights a week, she replied. Why? Because I have an idea, Michael said, but I need to make some calls first. Can I come back tomorrow night? Elena looked puzzled but nodded. I'll be here. Michael left a generous tip and walked out into the night, his mind racing. The next evening, Michael returned at 10 o'clock. This time he carried a leather portfolio under his arm. Elena was behind the counter, and her eyes widened when she saw him. You came back,